You thinking of moving to Delaware? Well, I've actually helped quite a few people relocate here to Delaware. And in the midst of helping those people, I actually find myself answering the same sort of questions. So I decided, why not make a video with those answers, with as well as everything you're going to need to know when moving here to Delaware. And I can promise you that you're going to get a lot of value out of this video, but this video is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be a bunch of fancy cuts and all the edits and everything. I want this to be a no-nonsense video, so you have to forgive me, and plus my editor's on vacation this week. So moving forward, I don't want to waste any more of your time. I'm not even going to waste your time with my intro. All you need to know is that my name is Brandon Windom. I'm a realtor here in Delaware. I'll put my info on screen, and if you need anything, feel free to hit me up. So with that being said, let's hop right into it. So the first thing that I think everyone should know if you're contemplating moving here to Delaware is the overall geography itself of Delaware. So Delaware is super small. It is only 96 miles long and 35 miles wide, and we only have 3 counties here. So we have Newcastle County, which is our northernmost county, and then we have Kent County, which is right there in the middle, and then you have Sussex County, which is at the end. So that's it, just 3. Now, you may be wondering, Brandon, why is it important that I know that there's only 3 counties? So the reason why I like to tell people this is because a lot of times they ask me, or I ask them, like, you know, where are you looking at? And they say, I don't know. The thing with those 3 counties is that they're each very distinct. So in Newcastle County, that's our northernmost county, and about 60% of our population is there. So, I mean, we only have about 1 million people or so here in Delaware. So as you can see that, you know, as you can guess that, you know, it's very densely populated there, and it has an overall feel of like maybe a busy suburb and a little bit of city-esque. We don't really have like a big city except for maybe Wilmington. But speaking of cities, some of the cities that are located in Newcastle County are, you got Claymont, Wilmington, Hockessin, we got Newark, Bear, Middletown, Odessa, Townsend, and those are just some of the cities that are in Newcastle County. Moving down to Kent County, which is right there in the middle, that's where the capital Dover is, as well as cities such as Smyrna, I said Dover, Camden, Magnolia, Felton, Wyoming, Milford. Those are all going to be in Kent County. Now, Kent County has an overall, I guess, like a rural suburban feel for the most part. It is our least populated county by, you know, population. And then you have Sussex County, which is overall, I mean, I guess on the west side of Sussex County is going to be very rural and farmlandish. And then you have obviously the east coastline where you're going to have all our beaches. So some of the cities that are in Sussex County are, you know, Lewis, Rehoboth, Dewey, Bethany, Milton. You got Fenwick Island, Georgetown, Seaford, Delmar, Laurel. All those towns are going to be in Sussex County. So let me see here. I got my little notepad here just so I stay on topic. So the next thing that I like to tell people is that nothing is really far in Delaware, because a lot of times I'll have people say like, I want to be close to things. So nothing is really far in Delaware. I mean, if you're talking about going up to the very tippy top of Delaware, you know, right where our fishhook is, right where we're going, almost into PA. A city that's very close to PA here in Delaware, or town, is Claymont. So if you travel from all the way to Claymont to Fenwick Island, which is all the way at the bottom of Delaware, it's going to take you about 2 hours. I mean, obviously if there's beach traffic, it might be more, but you know, everything is, you know, from the tippy top of our state to the bottom is only going to be 2 hours. So I mean, with that being said, everything is within, you know, anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes for most of your, you know, local things. If you go to maybe the beach or something like that, then that's when you might see a little bit more of a time to drive. But overall, your daily commute is probably going to be less than 30 minutes almost anywhere you're at in Delaware. But with that being said, just because everything is close, that's only if you have a vehicle. you're definitely going to need a vehicle while you're here in Delaware. I know I have clients who have relocated from places like New York and New Jersey, Philly, and they're really used to just being able to come out their house and maybe go on foot and get to where they need to go, or maybe the public transportation. That's not going to be the case here in Delaware. Our public transportation, I'm not going to say it sucks, but it ain't the greatest. I mean, you're either going to be using the bus. We don't really have a subway. We do have a train, but that's really not for local. That would be more so if you're traveling outside of the state, like if you're going to our surrounding states like New York, New Jersey, Maryland, things like that. Like I said, you're definitely going to need a car, and the public transportation isn't great. So the next thing I want to talk about, or a question that I see, or maybe more so of a misunderstanding, or I'm trying to think of the correct word to use here, I guess a myth, is I know a lot of people think, they're coming to Delaware and, Delaware is so cheap. But I mean, if you think you're going to come here to Delaware and buy a whole bunch of land or buy a house for like $100,000, that's not the case. Delaware homes and land is expensive. I mean, that's just the reality, unfortunately. I mean, the average house here in Delaware is probably going to cost you about $350,000, and that's going to depend on exactly where you're at and what type of house. Now, I know compared to our neighboring states, that may not, that may be just a drop in the bucket, especially compared to, the average sale in New York, New Jersey. Certain parts of Maryland are getting crazy, and even Pennsylvania, depending on where you're at. But I don't know, more often than not, I've had the conversation with people looking to move to Delaware, and I tell them what we're looking at, and they've come here to, retire or, get a good deal. And I tell them like, oh, hey, yeah, you're probably going to be looking at spending for, a single family house or something. You're going to spend around $350,000 to $400,000. And that may be not even a highly customized house. That may be just, a very decent and modest house. And they're like, what? And they have this shocked look on their face. That's just the reality now here in Delaware. I mean, we were just voted the #1 place to retire. So, I mean, the secret about Delaware is out, and I know everybody thinks they're the first one with a great idea, but you're not the first one. You're not the first person to think of moving to Delaware, from New York or New Jersey or Pennsylvania. So that's just something definitely to keep in mind. Speaking of expenses and things like that, one thing you definitely should know is that our closing costs here in Delaware are pretty high, or more specifically, our transfer tax. So our transfer tax is 4%. Now, usually that's split 50-50 between the buyer and the seller. So it's only about 2%, but 2% on $500,000 is, I know it don't seem like a lot, but you're like, well, I'm putting a down payment down, and if you're putting 2% down on $500,000, that's $10,000, and then you have to put another 2% down because of transfer tax, that's another $10,000. And then if you have a loan, loan origination fees, maybe that's 1%, or if you have to pay points, and you're talking about another $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, deed insurance. So those closing costs can add up pretty rapidly. So that's something you definitely want to keep in mind, or something I like to tell my clients here when relocating here to Delaware. Another thing, while we're speaking about closings and everything, is that Delaware is very streamlined when it comes to our closing process. So I know, firsthand from dealing with some of my New Jersey and New York clients, there's a lot of bureaucracy involved with all that. This lawyer has to talk to this lawyer, and then they have to, agree on contracts, and even just the verbiage in those contracts are very, ambiguous. So here in Delaware, our closings are usually anywhere. I mean, if you're a cash buyer, we can close, anywhere in 2 weeks. But in a regular transaction with a loan and, a mortgage being involved, it's usually only 30 to 45 days. So, I mean, just something to keep in mind if you're coming from another state and maybe you are contingent and you need to sell a home. That's something you definitely need to know in order to accurately, make your timeline, because you don't want to come here, find the home of your dreams, and then you're like, oh, well, I have to sell my home. And then when we're talking to the sellers of those homes, if you're buying a resale home, or even if it's a quick delivery, new construction or something, and we're saying, well, hey, we need 60 to 90 days to close this thing because, you're a state like New York or New Jersey, but the actual, man, I cannot find my words today for some reason. So the expectation that, a lot of Delaware sellers have, when they speak to their real estate agent is that, we're talking anywhere from 30 to 45 days. So they're, basing their timeline on that. So that's just something to keep in mind when, you're thinking about moving here to Delaware. So another thing that I want to talk about here also, that is, it just depends on where you're coming from. But in regards to, I hear a lot of people wanting to come here because Delaware is a little bit more rural, that they just want to buy land. And again, going back to what I said about the average price here, land is getting expensive as well, because all these developers are coming in and licking their lips because they got all this land to develop, and these people that are selling this land know that. So these prices are getting pretty pricey, and I mean, it's hard to even find just a lot on its own nowadays. It's usually a lot more acreage, and then they're subdividing that acreage, and those big developers are willing to pay, to whereas though when Delaware was a little bit more low key, you get that 1 acre and you can maybe grab that for 30, 40 grand or something like that. That same piece of land is like $80,000-$90,000. So I mean, I know everybody comes here, maybe wants to retire or something, or I just want a little bit of land that's my own or anything like that. It is pretty expensive, and to go along with that, just to tie it all in to where I was kind of getting at, is that when you do buy that land, depending on where you're at, honestly, if you buy any type of land that's over a half an acre, it's probably not going to be tied into the city. So you're not going to have like city sewer and public water. More than likely, you're going to have a septic system for your sewage and waste, and then a well for your water. So if that's something that you're not familiar with or you're not okay with, you may need to, temper your expectations or change your plan and maybe say, well, you know what, I don't think I'm going to buy that land because I don't want to deal with that. I just want to be in a subdivision, or maybe I just want smaller land. So when it comes to subdivisions here in Delaware, honestly, that's what a lot of the homes are in. I mean, I hear people talk about they don't want to be in an HOA a lot, but unfortunately, I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably about 80 to maybe even 90% of the homes that are for sale are probably going to be in the subdivision with a HOA. Now, I know we've become a little desensitized with all the TikToks and, even the YouTube here and stuff like that. You see these horror stories of like HOAs getting on people for dumb little stupid things. But I mean, just to be honest, here in Delaware, I mean, the HOAs are pretty relaxed. A lot of things are very, very common things that you'll see is, maybe fence height or a type of fence you can have, no like abandoned cars in the driveway, just stuff to keep the aesthetic of the community looking nice. Because when it comes to it, these developers and the people who are in the community only really care about, the aesthetic, and the developer only really cares for the aesthetic and, kind of wants to keep the community happy. But they don't want someone if they're building houses in here, they don't want someone coming in and like looking, oh, this place looks horrible, I don't never want to buy a house in here, and then they can't sell any of the houses. So a lot of that is just, housekeeping type stuff to keep the overall aesthetic over. I've never had anyone really tell me, at least so far, as saying the main reason why they moved is because the HOA was a nuisance and it really got to them. More so, it's like a nosy neighbor or just a horrible neighbor if there's some outside factor, causing them to want to move. Another, very common question I get is, what the weather's like. So, I mean, the weather here in Delaware, we have all 4 seasons. It's nothing too major. I mean, I'm younger. I've been here 34 years. I've never been affected by a natural disaster. So, I mean, and it's so weird to say because you've had things such as like Sandy in New York, to where I talk to my clients that come from there, like, yeah, we were in kayaks, and I'm like, oh yeah, it rained here, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. I didn't lose power or anything. It was just another day where we got some heavy rain and some wind. So, I mean, just overall, we do have all 4 seasons, and we have all 4 seasons, but most of them are pretty regular. I mean, sometimes it snows, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, it's windy because Delaware is super flat. if you're somebody who's looking for mountains and stuff like that, Delaware is not the place for it. And it rains, rains quite a bit here. And the summers are, obviously we're by all this water, it gets a little humid, it gets hot. But never really anything too extreme. Again, like I said, we really don't get hit by natural disasters. It's so funny because we'll be on the news, like I'll hear the news or look at the Weather Channel, they be like, buckle up for, horrible weather, or, there's a hurricane heading this way or something heading this way. And for some reason, it always just seems to miss us. I mean, knock on wood, but we just don't ever get hit really that hard. Another thing is just the overall feel of Delaware just in general. It's more so, I feel it's more so like a big suburb is, I guess, the best way to describe it. It's more Mother Nature than it is city-esque. So if you're someone who, I guess the reason why I say that, if you're someone who's looking for that hustle and bustle, maybe if you are a little bit younger and you want to get out and go to the clubs and nightlife and just always want to be around in the mix, Delaware really doesn't have that at a high level. I mean, when you get more so into places like Newcastle County that's more so densely populated, you can always find, something to do. But if you come from another city or you're comparing it to like New York or, Philly or, I got a lot of people come from, Texas and, just things like that. It just doesn't compare. Now, I mean, Delaware is definitely growing rapidly. I mean, our population just keeps going up because people keep moving here. So with that being in mind, a lot of developers in the state of Delaware are, bringing new developers, bringing new companies here, bringing new businesses here. Businesses are wanting to come here because they see the growth. So I do think that'll change, as, in the future. But as of right now, I mean, there are, if you're more so someone looking for that city, like go, Delaware isn't that. It's more so, there's a lot of nature here. We got 17 state parks. We got our beautiful beaches down there. And speaking of the beaches, another thing that you should know, I mean, they call us the nation's summer capital out there in Rehoboth Beach. But one thing you definitely want to be aware of is the beach traffic. It can get pretty bad. I mean, for traffic overall, Delaware isn't bad at all, especially compared to, our neighboring states. But something you definitely want to keep in mind when you're traveling down to the beach during those peak seasons, that traffic, if you're not leaving early enough, it can really, throw out your day and you might be there for a while. One of the things that I do see for families relocating here that I do like to mention is that I think it's a great place to raise children. But obviously that's opinion. You're looking for things you need to know. One of the things I do tell everyone is if you do have, children that you plan to be here a while and they're going to graduate from a Delaware high school, they do have it's called the Seed Scholarship. Obviously, I mean, it's been around for a while, so I don't think they're going to get rid of it. But if you graduate from a Delaware high school, they'll actually send you can actually get a scholarship to go to the community college, Del Tech, for free as long as you're a resident, you graduate from a Delaware high school and you have a certain GPA, and it's very attainable GPA. I think it's like a 2.0 or something like that. It's not anything crazy, maybe a 2.3 maybe. But yeah, you can look it all up, on the site. But that's another great thing. And then just overall, another thing that I will say about Delaware that you need to know, that's come to a culture shock for some, depending on where you're from, is that overall, I mean, the people here in Delaware are pretty friendly. I mean, if you're walking down the street and you make eye contact with somebody, chances are they're going to speak or at least acknowledge you. And if you ask a question, you may just be in line looking for, some good food or something like that, or maybe you're at a restaurant, you're like, hey, how is this place? And a person will probably spark up a whole conversation with you. And the reason why I mention this is that this has been said to me more than once by some of my clients that are relocating here to Delaware, is that they're just a little off-put at first, or they really like that, the people are a little bit more friendlier here, and it's just not so standoffish as maybe some of their other states. Talking to you, New York. But I mean, I would even venture to say if you're somewhere in a public place and you were to break down, like, you know, your hood's open because maybe you need to jump on your battery, or you got a flat tire and, you know, somebody sees you out with a jack, I would say if 10 people pass you, I would venture to say at least half of them, you know, 5 out of those 10 people will stop by and ask you if you need any help. There's been numerous times where, you know, I forgot my jumper cables or something like that, and somebody sees me with my hood open, it's like, hey man, you need a jump? Or they see the jumper cables in my hand and I don't have another battery. And, oh man, you need a jump? Or, you know, someone coming to help you fix a flat, or, you know, something like that. So that's just another thing to keep in mind as well. And if you're interested in learning more about Delaware, or actually seeing some of the homes we have here in Delaware, or knowing more about a specific area, I have a video right here.